This is an interesting join. It's called a splined butt join, and it's got two pieces of hardboard in there, or you can use two pieces of wood of a matching colour rather than contrasting. And I've made the slots as deep as the wood is wide, so you can have it either as a right angle join like that, or you could even join it like that if you wished, as a reinforced butt join. Now to do this cut, you've got to work with the wood up tall, working on the end grain for support, and here's how it's done. One way to do it, if you have the bevel ripping guide, is to set the guide at exactly 90 degrees and remove these bottom guides. You don't want them, you want to be sitting down on the Workcentre table, and make sure you do up these screws to stop anything vibrating loose. Now I've got my protractor set up, and it is set at 45 degrees, dead square at the table from this face. I've also adjusted my saw blade height so that the saw blade teeth are just proud of, or sort of flush with, this piece of wood, so that the depth of my cuts will equal the width of the wood, therefore I'll be able to set it up as a right angle join. Now you can't use the safety guard on this cut for obvious reasons. There's all this wood up above the saw blade, so I'm going to be very careful in doing this cut that I hold the wood firmly against the protractor, keep my hands well up away from the saw blade, and so that in case anything did happen during the cut, if the wood kicked or anything, my hands would be nowhere near the saw blade, not in danger of being cut. Also, there's no dust collection possible in this mode, so I'll be wearing my dust mask. Just before I put this on, I've set the fence parallel to the blade, and using the calibrated readings on the fence arms, and I've set it up so that on my first cut I'll do the outside part of this cut, then turn it around off the other face and do the matching cut on the other side, as easily as this. Now by simply moving the fence in about 3 millimeters, I could do another cut and turn it around and another cut and make those two as wide as these two. It's as easy as that. As long as you do to one side and then repeat it to the other side, you'll always be symmetrical about the center line of the piece of wood. Did you notice how when doing those cuts, when I did the cut, I pulled the wood around this way and turned it around, rather than pulling it back in the same direction as a saw blade spinning, because if you do that, if you pull it back over the spinning saw blade, you could suffer recut damage. Another really strong and attractive joint is this blind miter joint, where this little arrow-shaped key of hardboard has been glued into the two mitered pieces to make it very attractive and very strong. The way to do it's very simple. All you do is set your saw blade height to cut the appropriate depth, whatever you choose, in the wood, and that's done. Set the bevel ripping guide parallel to the blade, and use the protractor. I'll be using this 45-degree face, so I can sit my wood down firmly on the table like that, hold it up against the sandpaper face, keep a good grip on it, well clear of the saw blade, and concentrating on keeping this piece of board against the bevel ripping guide. I can then just run it through and then reset the fence and do a second cut to get my 6 millimeter wide slot. Incidentally, if you do find that the bevel ripping guide is flexing slightly as you push sideways on it, there is a fix for it. An 8 millimeter or 5/16 coach bolt with a couple of flats filed on the head is the ideal size to fit into the table infills, and it drops in the protractor opening, and the square neck fits neatly into the slot in the table and won't allow it to turn. And then you can get a scrap piece of particle board, for example, with a slot in it, and the slot is to allow fence adjustments, and then just push it gently up against the back of the bevel ripping guide when the bevel ripping guide is set for a particular cut, and then a couple of washers and a nut. If I tighten that down with a spanner, not too tightly, you don't want to deform the infills in the table, but you can nip it up quite firmly, then you can push against the bevel ripping guide as hard as you like and you won't deflect that edge. If you haven't got a bevel ripping guide, you can still do some of the cuts you've just seen, but the first thing you've got to do is to make your fence a bit taller to support the workpiece. That's easily achieved. I've got this strip of 32mm thick MDF, about 1 metre long and about 125 high, and I've just made up these two little brackets on the back that will clamp at the back of the fence. I've had to move the bevel ripping guide angles inboard a little bit, but that's quite easy, and then this simply attaches the fence like so and clamps on quite firmly and rigidly. Okay, always double check with a square that your extended fence is indeed square to the table, which that one is. If it wasn't, you might have to put some packing in between the back of the fence and the edge of the rip fence to adjust it inwards or outwards at the top slightly. But that's all fine, that's rigid and square. Now you'll have to make yourself up a little rider block like this, which is another little piece of that same MDF with two cheek plates on either side to stop it wobbling, and a pusher block, which you will cut into during some of your cuts, but it basically enables you to accurately guide the work past the blade with your hands well clear of the saw blade, and basically you're doing this, just as you saw earlier, holding the wood against your pusher block, then holding the whole block and sliding it through over the saw blade, turning it around and doing another cut from the other side. If you were doing something at 45 degrees using this homemade arrangement, then clearly you'd remove that pusher block and probably extend another piece like this at 45 degrees so you could hold the wood against that block and down on the Workcentre table and push it through as you saw earlier.